To me, the world was a series of architectural blueprints. Love was a chemical inefficiency, a glitch in a system that otherwise ran on the cold, hard logic of compound interest and inherited prestige. I viewed emotions as variables to be managed, and attraction as a simple matter of mathematics, or perhaps, more accurately, a matter of lineage. My life was a masterpiece of clinical order, lived within the glass and steel confines of Thorne Capital. From my 60th floor office, the city of Manhattan didn't look like a collection of souls. It looked like a circuit board I had already mastered. They had to be ornaments that matched the furniture of my life. I remember the night I sealed my fate with a single, arrogant sentence.
The air in the sanctum, a private club where the membership fee cost more than a mid-sized home, was thick with the scent of aged leather and 30-year-old scotch. I sat with Marcus and Liam, the only two men I considered my equals. They were both married now, settled into the lives our families had mapped out for us like royal successions. "Your mother is losing her mind, Aries," Marcus said, swirling a sphere of ice in his amber liquid. "She's paraded every socialite from London to Manhattan in front of you, and you find a flaw in every single one. One's laugh is too loud, another's pedigree is too new money. What is it? What are you looking for?" I took a slow, deliberate sip. My heart was a frozen tundra, and I preferred the stillness of the ice. "I seek a partnership, Marcus."
Not a decorative accessory. Most of these women are predictable. They are echoes of their mothers, waiting for a ring to validate their existence. Liam leaned back, a cynical smirk dancing on his lips. "We know your type, Aries. Tall, blonde, European heritage, the Thorne standard. But you've always been specific about what you don't want." I didn't flinch. I let the cold certainty of my own ignorance settle over the table like a suffocating fog. "It's not malice," I said, my voice as sharp and cutting as a diamond. "It's logic. I will never date a black woman. I simply don't feel we would have anything in common. Culturally, aesthetically, I don't find them attractive. Why settle for a puzzle I have no interest in solving?" I was so sure of my own divinity. I thought I was a god, sitting on a throne of my own making, unaware that I was merely a blind man trapped in a dark room, waiting for a sun I didn't believe existed to rise. The change didn't happen with a thunderclap. It happened with the rhythmic, authoritative click of a heel on polished marble. It was a Tuesday. The boardroom was a sterile vacuum of white light and expensive glass. We were interviewing for a new head of logistics, a position I usually wouldn't oversee personally, but Thorne Capital was expanding its global footprint. The doors swung open, and the air in the room didn't just move, it shifted. It became heavy, charged with an unfamiliar electricity. I expected a candidate. I saw a goddess. Zora Nyx did not walk into a room. She colonized it. She was mahogany and silk, a living masterwork of color and grace. Her skin was a flawless, rich brown that seemed to glow from within, catching the overhead LED lights like a polished gemstone. Her hair was a dark, lustrous waterfall, straight and sleek, falling perfectly over her shoulders, but the ends held a soft, defiant curl that seemed to catch the light with every movement. She wasn't wearing the boxy, unflattering power suit I expected from a corporate climber. She wore a tailored, floor-length wrap dress in a deep charcoal silk that draped over her body with a liquid, predatory grace. She looked like a young Beyoncé stepped out of a high-fashion editorial, possessed of a regality that made everyone else in the room look like a background character in her story. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," she said. Her voice was a cello, crisp, elegant, and perfectly modulated. It wasn't the voice of someone seeking approval. It was the voice of someone who already owned the ground she stood on. I managed to nod, my just ruler mask firmly in place.
but beneath the surface, my pulse was a frantic, irregular drum. During her presentation, I found myself paralyzed. She spoke about supply chain optimization and global infrastructure with a brilliance that made the numbers dance, but I wasn't looking at the charts. I was looking at her. The way her hands moved, precise, elegant gestures that seemed to command the very molecules of the air. The way her lips moved as she enunciated every syllable with the precision of a poet. I noticed the tiny, devastating things.
The way her brow furrowed in a sharp V of concentration, the delicate, intoxicating scent of her perfume, a mix of sandalwood, jasmine, and an underlying spice that lingered in the air long after she spoke. When the meeting ended, I stayed in my chair for a long time, staring at the empty seat where she had sat. My ivory tower hadn't just cracked, it was beginning to melt. The weeks that followed were a descent into a beautiful, terrifying madness. I am a man of strategy, and I applied that strategy to Zora. I began to arrange meetings solely to ensure she was in the room. I would restructure my entire billion-dollar schedule just to catch her in the hallway for 30 seconds.
I wanted to see the way she moved, the way she carried her precise elegance into every interaction, making the most powerful men in the city look like bumbling children. But it wasn't enough to just see her. I was consumed by a sudden, violent need to understand the world that had created her. I spent my nights in my penthouse, the city lights blurred through the glass, doing research that had nothing to do with finance. I sat with my laptop, my face illuminated by the blue light of the screen, as I searched for things I had once dismissed with a wave of my hand. I read about the history of the African diaspora, realizing the depth of the strength she carried. I researched the complexities of black hair care, wanting to understand the hours of devotion she put into those soft, dark curls.
I looked up traditional West African dishes, imagining the spices that made her skin smell like a dream of the sun. I was ashamed. Every time I thought about that night in the sanctum with Marcus and Liam, a hot coal of regret burned in my chest. How could I have been so blind? How could I have looked at a woman like Zora and seen anything less than a queen? My admiration shifted into awe, and the awe shifted into a complete, utter devotion. I didn't even realize it was happening until I found myself in the middle of a high-stakes board meeting, staring at the back of her head, wishing I could reach out and touch the silk of her dress just to confirm she was real. I was no longer the ruler of Thorne Capital. I was her most dedicated subject, and she didn't even know it.
The revelation, the moment I knew I was truly broken, came at the annual Thorne Gala. The ballroom was a sea of black and white, a sterile display of old-world wealth. Then Zora arrived. She wore a backless, emerald green gown that draped over her supermodel physique like it had been molded to her skin by a sculptor. It featured a high slit that revealed the elegant, powerful line of her legs, and the silk moved like water against her mahogany skin. The room went silent for a heartbeat as she entered. Even the music seemed to bow. I watched her move through the crowd, her elegance a sharp, painful contrast to the clumsy social climbing around her. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird.
I was the Greek god of the industry, a man who never showed a flicker of weakness, yet my hands were shaking as I reached for a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. I approached her. "Miss Nyx," I said, my voice low and husky, stripped of its usual corporate edge, "would you grant me the honor of this dance?" She looked at me, her amber eyes searching mine. She saw the vulnerability I was trying to hide. She saw the man behind the mask, the man who was currently crumbling in her presence. "I would like that, Aries," she said, her voice a soft caress. That dance changed the trajectory of my soul. As the music swelled, the world around us ceased to exist. I held her close,
Not too close to be unprofessional, but close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin. "I've never felt this way before," I whispered into her ear, the confession torn from me. She pulled back slightly, her gaze cautious and sharp. "You're my boss, Aries, and you're not the type of man who looks at women like me. I've heard the rumors of your preferences. I know the Thorne legacy." "I was a fool," I said, my voice raw with an honesty that would have terrified me a month ago. I was a man living in a cave, convinced that the shadows on the wall were the only truth. You are the light, Zora. You are the only thing I see now. Everything else is just noise. From that moment, I became a man on a full-on obsessive pursuit. I was relentless. I didn't just want a date. I wanted her heart. I sent her flowers, not red roses, which were too cliché for a woman of her depth, but rare orchids and white lilies, the flowers my research told me symbolized purity and strength. I wrote her notes on heavy, cream-colored cardstock, expressing my admiration for her mind, for her logistic strategies, and for the way she challenged my every assumption. Zora was a survivor. She had faced the cold edge of prejudice before, and she was wary of me. She didn't want to be the CEO's trophy. She didn't want to be the reason for the whispers in the elevator. 6 months, Zora, I told her one evening, as we stood in the quiet, moonlit lobby of the office, the city humming below us. I have pursued you for 6 months. I have changed my life for you.
I have dismantled every belief I once held because of you. Just one date. If you don't feel what I feel, I will never speak of it again. I will step down before I make you uncomfortable." She looked at me for a long time, her eyes tracing the lines of my face as if looking for the lie. She found none. She nodded. "One date, Aries, just one." That date turned into 10, then 20. I took her to places that celebrated her culture, not mine. We ate in tiny, vibrant restaurants in Harlem and Brooklyn where the music was loud and the food was spiced with history. I watched her eyes light up as she told me stories of her family, of her dreams of being a supermodel, that she had traded for a career in logistics because she wanted to build something tangible, something that lasted.
I realized I wasn't just falling in love with a woman. I was falling in love with a soul that was far more vast and ancient than mine. She was kind, she was fierce, and she was phenomenally intelligent. She was the architect now, and I was just the building. But our happiness was met with a beautiful monster. My mother, Eleanor Thorne, was the living embodiment of the prejudice I had once held. She sat me down in her drawing room, surrounded by portraits of ancestors who looked like ghosts. "This fascination has gone far enough, Aries," she said, her voice like a scalpel. "You are jeopardizing our business relationships. People are talking. The board is concerned about distractions. You are a thorn. Act like one."
I stood up, my height towering over her, my shadow stretching across the expensive Persian rug. My just ruler persona returned, but this time it was fueled by a protective fire I had never known. "Let them talk, Mother," I said, my voice echoing off the marble walls. "If the Thorne name is too fragile to handle the woman I love, then the name isn't worth having. I am not having a fascination. I am marrying Zora Nyx, and if anyone, be it a board member or a family member, disrespects her, they will find out exactly how ruthless I can be when I have something worth fighting for." The workplace became a battlefield. I watched as colleagues tried to bully her, tried to freeze her out with cold shoulders and lost emails. They thought they could break her.
They didn't realize she was a queen, and I was her king. I was the law, and the law was Zora. I fired 3 senior executives in a single week for unprofessional conduct after I overheard a snide comment in the break room. I didn't care about the optics. I cared about her peace. I didn't want a private engagement. I wanted a public declaration. At a major corporate gala, in front of the world's press, the board, and our families, I took the stage. I looked out at the sea of faces, the same faces I used to seek approval from. And then I looked at Zora. She sat in the front row, wearing a gown of gold silk that draped over her like liquid sunshine. I walked down from the podium,
ignored the teleprompter, and knelt in the center of the room.
The cameras flashed, 1,000 artificial stars, but I only saw her. "Zora Nyx," I said, my voice amplified so every biased ear in the room could hear it. "You didn't just change my mind, you taught me how to see. You are my queen, my partner, and my heart. Will you marry me?" The silence was deafening. Then Zora smiled, a radiant, beautiful smile that broke the last of the ice in my soul. "Yes," she whispered. 6 months later, we were married. It was a cross-cultural masterpiece that shocked the social registers. The air was filled with the scent of African spices and expensive champagne. There was fufu and agusi soup served alongside lobster and caviar. I wore a custom suit with kente cloth accents woven into the lining, and Zora, she was a vision in white lace and gold that made the very air stand still. As we stood at the altar, I held her hand. Her skin was a beautiful, rich mahogany against my pale palm, a contrast that was now the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I looked back at the man who said he'd never date a black woman, and I didn't recognize him. That man was a statue, cold and hollow. I am a man now, a man who is completely broken and devoted to a love I never thought I deserved. "I am yours," I told her as we danced our first dance, do a blend of jazz and Afro beats, in this life and every other. That Zora Nyx was my beginning, my middle, and my end. The logic of the heart had finally overruled the mathematics of the mind.